Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. It's good to be back. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Very nice to have you back. Kyle did a good job holding down the front.
You did a great job. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
You were definitely missed. Listen, guys, today we're going deep on Afghanistan from a variety of angles. We'll bring you up to speed on everything that has happened as of this morning. How the media is handling it. I don't think you'll be all that surprised. We've got a great guest on, Richard Hanania, to break down exactly what happened and to sort of push back on some of the critiques, I think, of the Biden administration. But there's also other news that we want to get to as well. The census numbers have come out. They're quite interesting, quite revealing. There was also a horrific earthquake in Haiti, that poor nation. We'll update you there on the absolute latest. I also have a Fox News segment that I could not let go unnoticed, so I'll bring you the details on that. But we do want to start this morning with the very latest coming out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I know a lot of you have probably seen, you're saying, what the hell is going on? The government collapse. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning. So what has happened is that the Trump administration, February of 2020, begins this peace process with the Taliban. They decide May 1st, 2020, all U.S. forces be pulled out. Biden inherits this peace deal, says, okay, we're going to get out. He's revised his timeline, says August 31st, 2020. In the midst of all of that, the Taliban, because U.S. forces are beginning to pull out, because we're beginning not to give the immense support to the Afghan National Security Forces, which we have, they launch an offensive. And so the Long War Journal, which is a very well respected journal here in DC that tracks kind of Taliban movements, put together this little animation. I just want to give you guys an idea of how quickly this began. So you can see here, the red districts are the Taliban. So you're beginning to see October of 2020, April 2021, the encroachment of the Taliban all across the country, holding provincial capitals. But there, as it begins to move, for those who are just listening, July of 2021 is when things just absolutely speed up. And you can see right there the encirclement. This date goes all the way up just to yesterday of the Taliban and how they have captured every single major provincial capital within Afghanistan, which has a substantial population. And there's a lot to be said there, Krystal, which is that what we are seeing is the overnight, essentially, collapse of $100 billion of American money, of American blood, of American military might that we gave these people. We supported this army, gave them every chance they possibly could in order to fight for their own country, and they folded within 3 weeks. That's the absolute truth of the matter. And there's a lot to be said that we'll get throughout the show about Biden and more. But I think the brass tacks is that the Afghan army and the Afghan political, apparatus, you could barely call it a government, was so incompetent, corrupt, and inept that they folded in a manner that the biggest doomer on Afghanistan there probably is, I would never have predicted that they would fold this quickly.
It was even worse than we thought.
Way worse.
We were lied to.
Oh, man.
Even more than we thought. I think these presidents have been lied to routinely. I think the military has been lying to themselves, too, by the way. The bottom line is the military was fake, the government was fake, the development aid was fake. All we did was create a massive system of kleptocracy that had zero local support. And so, when these Afghan fighters, when they saw the writing on the wall, they already had deals ready to go with the Taliban.
They'd all been paid off. So it was done.
A lot of these, takeovers were basically bloodless. They handed over the weapons, they ceded control, they left, they fled, et cetera,
Our
et cetera.
weapons, just so people know.
Exactly. So, look, the bottom line is this was a long time coming. The reason why president after president kept us there is because they did not want the American people to learn the truth about how their money had been wasted and squandered and lives lost on literally nothing. Just to give you a sense of the scale that we're talking about here, we spent more in Afghanistan over these past 20 years than we spent, adjusted for inflation, in all of the Marshall Plan to rebuild all of Western Europe. All of Western Europe.
I can only laugh because it makes me want to cry.
And this is what there is to show for it. And I just want to be clear, it's heartbreaking. The images, people are at the airport, they're hanging on to planes and losing their lives, reportedly, just trying to flee the country. It has definitely not been a well-executed process, which we're going to get to more on. But I just want to say out of the gates, I give Biden so much credit for sticking to this. And this is where actually, and he's been all over the board in terms of foreign interventions and good on foreign policy sometimes and terrible on it other times. It appears like his long experience in Washington gave him the courage to move forward with what he knew was likely to be ugly.
Yeah.
What he knew was very potentially likely to have political blowback and be politically unpopular, although I would not say that that is as clear cut as those in the media are portraying it. He came into office at the end of Vietnam. He saw the limits of American foreign intervention. He served 8 years under the Obama administration. He opposed the surge. He saw the lies that were being told to the American people, and he came in determined to end this thing and had the courage to do it when president after president, Democrat and Republican, were unable to do it. So that's kind of the bottom line here as events continue to unfold.
I think that's right.
We've got some more elements here we can throw up. So in particular, of course, the president, President Ghani, fled the nation. Taliban is fully, we've got that Washington Post tear sheet. The Taliban is fully taken over the government in Kabul effectively. There's pictures of them in the presidential palace. Again, this happened with a speed that none of us could have possibly imagined. And to give you a sense of the very aggressive and unrepentant, I would say, attitude that the Biden administration is taking, we have a piece of President Biden's statement on what has happened here. He says, look, and this is just a portion of what he said, over our country's 20 years at war in Afghanistan, America has sent its finest young men and women, invested nearly $1 trillion, trained over 300,000 Afghan soldiers and police, equipped them with state-of-the-art military equipment, and maintained their air force as part of the longest war in U.S. history. 1 more year or 5 more years of U.S. military presence would not have made a difference if the Afghan military cannot or will not hold its own country, and an endless American presence in the middle of another country's civil conflict was not acceptable to me. And in fact, Saagar, some of the reporting this morning suggests that the speed of the collapse actually bolstered the Biden administration's case internally because it made them realize, look, these generals are trying to, just give us 6 more months.
I know.
Just give us another year. Just give us 5 more years.
Look.
Would not have mattered. This was the outcome, no matter how long we ultimately stayed.
I completely agree. And on the strategic level, look, Joe Biden has got stones of steel, as far as I'm concerned, because the media onslaught, the foreign policy establishment, everybody is going after him, trying to get out. And there's a lot of discussion here. I see a lot of the right trying to paint this into some, humiliation abroad. This is what ending a war looks like. There is a lot of discussion. Oh, we should have planned better and more. And look, I want to be clear. What is happening in Kabul is horrible. I mean, if you're one of those people who relied on the government and then we weren't able to get you out, that is shameful. And we should do everything in our power in order to make sure that could happen. But the alternative, and we're going to talk about this with Richard Hanania, is what? We stay 3 more months, 4 more months? People need to realize we had a peace deal with the Taliban. If we all of a sudden change the timeline and we say we're going to stay 3 more months, 4 months, be honest. That means you are cool with weapons free on American soldiers. And I'm not cool with that. I don't think one more life, one more American life, one more American limb, one more person coming back all screwed up from this war is worth staying there another day, especially given how you see this government and its military conduct itself. But look, the truth is that this is a horrible situation. And in terms of the optics of it, we have to be real. It's not great. This is what it looks like whenever you're defeated in a war. Let's put this up there in terms of the helicopter. This was going all around everywhere in terms of the photo of the helicopter that was seen at the U.S. Embassy, the evacuation there underway. A lot of discussion and comparison there to Saigon. But, I want to make a point here, which is that you want to know the truth, Krystal? The media hasn't cared about this. A U.S. embassy in Afghanistan has been so insecure for so many years that the U.S. cannot risk bringing people from Hamid Karzai or Bagram International Airport by road to the embassy as they were able to. Yeah. They have had to shuttle back and forth by helicopter for years because the streets themselves are so insecure and so vulnerable to attack that they cannot risk it. That's the thing. Everybody wants to focus on the helicopter now. Let's talk about the helicopter over the last 5 years, which is that over the last 5 years, we have spent so many billions of dollars in that country so that the security situation could deteriorate, thus that we cannot even move from the airport 2 miles away to the embassy, except via helicopter, in order to make sure that our people don't get killed on the ground. This is why I ask everybody to, look, I know the images are sad, and I know it's shameful, and look, it's embarrassing. You know, as a nation and more, it's devastating, really, when you think about how many people came back and how many people lost limbs and lost lives and more. And we try to cling on to meaning, and we are a great country. But we also have to admit the truth of what the monumental failure that has happened here. We already have, this is my favorite part, the guy that Bush put in charge, let's put this up there, Hamid Karzai, who Dick Cheney and Bush, one of the most corrupt people on the planet, is now saying that he will form a, quote, coordination council to manage the peaceful transition of power to the Taliban. So the guy we picked, the guy whose brother was a drug dealer and who he himself has become a nice multi-millionaire, suspiciously, you know, just out of nowhere, sure where all that money.
A lot of drug money.
Wonder where all that money came from, you know, exactly. A lot of Lockheed Martin dollars and more. But Hamid Karzai, the guy we put in charge, is now managing the transition of power to the Taliban. I think that those two images show you just the monumental failure of our general class, of our presidents. These people lied to us for 20 years. The lies were even worse than we thought.
And we couldn't have imagined.
I could not even imagine that you spend $100 billion. Ashraf Ghani and more, who we have propped up, despite the fact he's one of the most useless people on the planet. I mean, all these governments, these elections that we ran, how many American soldiers died in order to secure the ballot boxes so that corrupt people like Karzai and them could exist? And this is how it all ends.
Well, and not to mention the over 100,000 Afghani people who died and that the media did not care about until this exact moment. Right, we'll get to the media angle in a moment. But, you know, everybody wants to talk about Saigon now. And I think we should, actually, because, you know what? We should have learned a lot more from that experience.
That's a good point.
Than apparently we did. This whole thing was birthed in complete arrogance and hubris. If you were going to go in to get bin Laden, fine. Go get bin Laden and get the hell out. That's what this should have been from the beginning. Yeah. The idea that you're going to remake this society and you're going to have schools and girls flourish, all of this, like, this was complete arrogance. Complete arrogance. And so now we see, after 2 decades, all of it gone poof, like it was never, ever there. And so look, the bottom line for me with Biden is, was this executed perfectly, wonderfully, beautiful? No. Incompetent mess based on terrible intelligence. Military either had no idea or they were lying to his face or whatever. But ultimately, yeah, the buck stops with him. And the fact that we weren't able to, in an organized fashion, get our people out is embarrassing. But would I take Biden's policy towards Afghanistan over Trump's, over Obama's, and certainly over George W. Bush? Hell yes. Every single day of the week. And I think that is the perspective that is wildly missing from all of the media takes here. But look, let's talk about that wildly faulty, inaccurate intelligence that was being provided to him.
He shouldn't have believed it. He should have known better.
Absolutely. So let's take a listen to what he was saying just about a month ago on July 8th.
Why can't you evacuate? Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped as any army in the world, and an air force against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
So, look.
He set himself up for that one.
Could not have been more wrong, because the intelligence community was wildly overestimating how effective the Afghan government and military would ultimately be. They thought that the Taliban would ultimately take over, but that it would take months, something like 18 months for that ultimately to happen, giving the U.S. government time to evacuate their personnel, because they didn't want these images of having to be forced down, rushed down. They also knew how symbolic the evacuation of embassy personnel ultimately is. So they were trying to hold off on that. But yeah, I mean, he should have known better. Even that 300,000 troop number.
Yeah, that's fake. Everybody
is completely
knows that's
fake.
Yeah.
They have tens of thousands of fake soldiers on the rosters where the money for the salary is really going to some warlord or whoever. Right. So he should have known better. And I think it's good to, close out this portion with reminding you all of something that we covered together long ago back on Rising that got very, very little attention. The Afghanistan papers that revealed how much we had been lied to over the years. We can throw this Washington Post tear sheet up on the screen here. Craig Whitlock, who actually has a book that is just about to drop on the Afghanistan papers and detailing the lies and the reality of what has really been going on the ground in Afghanistan now for these 2 decades. But I don't know that anything sums it up better than Douglas Lute, who's a 3-star Army general, served as the White House's Afghan war czar during both the Bush and Obama administrations. He said from the beginning, we didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking. And that has continued clearly to be the case over all these many years. They also said, look, it was impossible during Obama's surge, which remember when we were being fed the lies about the surge is working, the surge is working. A senior NSC official during that time says, it was impossible to create good metrics about the surge. We tried using troop numbers, trained, violence levels, control of territory. None of it painted an accurate picture. The metrics were always manipulated for the duration of the war. So those are just a few of the quotes of officials when they were actually being honest about what was going on there. Another one said the only project was basically creating kleptocracy.
Yes.
Which is also, what has become apparently, abundantly clear. The government was fake. It had zero local support. The army was fake. They were ready to turn things over to the Taliban the moment that seemed like the right thing to do. And the entire project from the very beginning, they had no idea what they were doing. It was baked and bathed in hubris and arrogance, and it was always going to end exactly as it did.
I think a lot of people have a much higher estimation of American capability than exists. I see many of my own friends very upset about what's happening about the Afghan interpreters. I am too. I've met many of them here. Actually, a lot of them live here in the DC area. I feel for those people, and we should do everything in our power in order to get them out. And if that entails striking deals with the Taliban, having to pay people off in order to get them out, so be it.
Yep.
I think they earned it, and I think they're worth the money. But these papers, they detailed that if you're angry right now, emotions are high, think about who to blame. The intelligence community kept us there under false pretenses. They also fed bad information to the Biden administration, obviously, about the capability of the Afghans. The Pentagon themselves, where the hell have they been? They had 18 months to plan for withdrawal. 18 months. Now, this is forgotten history. Back in 2011, we had an expiring deal with the Iraqi government called the Status of Forces Agreement. The Obama administration said, no, we're not going to renew it. We're going to get the hell out of there. All U.S. forces were done with Iraq. The Pentagon did the exact same thing then that they did now. They knew the deadline was coming, and they basically kept all of our supplies in Iraq in order to try and force the Obama administration's hand in order to try and stay. Who is to say that they didn't do the exact same thing? They've had 18 months in order to get the hell out of Afghanistan. Same with the State Department. Why are you guys taking so long in order to process special Afghan visas? It's not rocket science in terms of how long it takes. You knew the deadline was coming. Here's the truth, Krystal. I blew my bones. These people thought that Biden and everybody else would fold. They're going to say, no president wants to see the images that we're seeing in Kabul. No president wants to see Humvees and all this stuff fall into the hands. And so they are going to blink. They'll go eyeball to eyeball. The military wins every single time. And the lies and all of the money and all of the treasure, everything, the blood wasted of the Afghan people, of the American people, it's all detailed right here. From the beginning, since 2012, actually, I'll point this out in my monologue. Every general who has commanded has lied to the American public about the capability of the Afghan forces. All of them should be dragged before Congress and say, why did you lie to us?
Yep.
Not one of them should be multimillionaires, which they are. They're all working for the defense contractors. John Allen is president of the freaking Brookings Institution, which just put out a new paper saying that we should bomb the civilian population of Afghanistan into submission so that they fight against the Taliban. This is in 2021. They're proposing these types of things.
Well, and it's easy to talk about the kleptocracy of Karzai and Ghani, but how about the kleptocracy that's based right here, inside and outside of Washington, D.C., here in Northern Virginia, where all these military-industrial complex ghouls are located? This was the greatest grift known to man.
Oh, yeah. There's so many millionaires minted off this war.
People got so rich off of this war, this immoral war that got the American people and the Afghani people absolutely nothing. And that's what fed this thing. That fed this for years and years. And the other thing that fed it for years and years is that commander-in-chief after commander-in-chief did not want people to actually see the truth. And that's what you're seeing right now. That's what we're really learning, is the actual reality on the ground in Afghanistan and how nothing over these 20 years was gained whatsoever. And the last thing I'll say here, to your point about these people and their motives and their incentives and why they lie and why they do what they do and why they didn't prepare at all for this exit is also, look, for them, this benefits them and their narrative to be in a disaster, to be in total chaos. All of that benefits the Hawks. But just think of that mindset, that what we're learning now is how unconscionable this entire conflict was and how ludicrous from the very beginning. And so what's their response? Their response is, it's even worse than we told you, so listen to us again.
Yes.
I mean, really, and that's the piece. Put that to anyone who's, saying that this is a disaster, we shouldn't have gotten out, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, what is your answer? What would you do? Would you have us go back in for a year, for 5 years, for 20 years, for 100 years? Because whenever it is you leave, this is what the result is ultimately going to be. And none of them have any answer for that whatsoever.
Imagine if these people, everybody who's so outraged, these Republican officials and even, some of these neocon Democrats and the media, imagine if they cared that much about the 20-year-olds who were blown to bits by a suicide bomb in order to protect a government which didn't want to govern and in order to protect an army that didn't want to fight. Ask any enlisted member who has deployed to Afghanistan since 2012. All of them have a story about being in a firefight with the Taliban where they're on the front line and the Afghans turn and run. Every single one of them knows, and I don't want to erase the heroism. There are hundreds of thousands of Afghans who fought bravely and more, but the vast majority of their force, and especially their leadership, and especially their presidential apparatus and more, they were corrupt as hell, and they had no interest in fighting, and that is why they folded in a matter of weeks. If you're one of those people who believes that we should have stayed and had an alternative plan and all of this, really what you're doing is you're a patsy for the forever war game. And I know that you want to believe that America and the military is more competent than what we're seeing, but it's not. We have learned since 1975. I love, all these comparisons of Saigon. What are you guys saying? We should have stayed in Saigon?
Right,
Actually, leaving Saigon was the right move.
And we should have done it sooner, too, by the way.
We should have done it sooner.
Should never have been there in the first place, as we should never have been in Afghanistan for the long term in the first place either. There's two other pieces of history that I just have to mention. One is the fact that we went into Iraq. That was an ultimate distraction that kept us from getting bin Laden in Afghanistan to start with, which, look, the mission from the jump, what we were told is basically, okay, we're going to go in and get bin Laden, get the hell out. Okay, people maybe could get on board with that. And the fact that they were so fixated on Iraq kept them from accomplishing that mission, and that justified staying for all these years and years and years. And then the other thing, just in terms of learning the lessons of history and understanding the limits of American power and the arrogance and hubris with which we have operated in the world, we are a big part of the reason why the Taliban emerged and came to power in the first place, coming out of using Afghanistan as a Cold War plaything, as the Soviet Union did, and as we did as well, backing the Mujahideen, using Saudi and Pakistan as basically our proxies to pick which groups they wanted to fund and back the most. They backed the most radical of these extremist Islamic groups, and that is like the seeds and the birthing of how the Taliban came to be in Afghanistan in the first place. So At every step of the way, what we have done in Afghanistan has only made things worse. We stayed for 20 years, and all we did was make the Taliban stronger.
A lot stronger and a lot richer.
That isn't a lot. Oh, and
Yeah.
let's not forget the fact now they've got a bunch of our weaponry.
Yeah.
So now they're also one of the best equipped militaries on the freaking planet. That's what your 20 years and your tax dollars and all of that ultimately got us, a stronger Taliban. And I hope people talk about this. I hope they remember the lessons of Saigon. And I hope to God we do not repeat these failures again. Do I have confidence that that will be the case? Maybe for a couple years.
Yeah.
Maybe for a minute we'll remember those lessons and then it'll be forgotten to history just like Saigon was.
How are we supposed to remember when we have the media that we have? And this is a good transition, to the next segment.
Exactly right. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.